Jacqueline Nicholson with the Gerson Lehrman Group. We're delighted to partner with the HBA today to bring you a conversation between two amazing women on the topic of innovation. Innovation's at the heart of everything we do. The Gerson Lehrman Group was founded 12 years ago with the idea of facilitating conversations with business leaders and the world's foremost experts. So we invite you to listen in on this conversation on innovation.
Kathleen, good afternoon. It's so great to see you
Wendy,
again.
it's very nice to see you again, too. And I'm thrilled that we're able to talk about innovation together.
Exactly. It's a small world. Yeah, it's a pretty important topic, I think.
Well, why don't we start with that? Why is it so important for pharmaceutical companies to innovate today?
Well, I think the industry is in a really, really important and challenging place. And combine that with the recession, I think the successful companies are going to actually take advantage of this and find ways to leverage and grow out of the complexities that are hitting them, whether it be patent cliffs or reimbursement challenges or figuring out ways to grow their business in unusual ways.
So it sounds to me like this will be a transformational time. We're going to see a shakeup in the industry.
Well, I think there are going to be companies who really can move forward and really have the culture and the drive to be innovative at the same time as they're going through all the necessary continuous improvement and right sizing and what have you. I think investing in a handful of well-funded, well-understood breakthrough ideas that could really pivot the company, I think that's going to be where the company's going to be successful. And I think that, traditionally, if you think about innovation over the last 20 or so years in the industry, it's been very much around product innovation. Not solely, but very much. Obviously, we've had amazing miracle drugs over the last 20 years. And so I think the other thing that companies need to do is to think beyond product innovation. They should look to other industries to find ways to leverage all across the business continuum, from research through to the customer experience, evaluate ways that R&D and business models could be changed, the way they could be interfaced with each other, the way delivery systems and services can be leveraged, as well as the customer experience. It's very easy to think of what Nintendo did with Wii and totally changing the paradigm of the way it was competing with Microsoft and Xbox, but that was a big idea from the CEO of Nintendo to say we need to change the way we compete, and it was all around customer experience. So that's just another industry example. So I think there are things that the industry can leverage, and I think actually it's a pretty exciting time to be in the industry to figure out how to do that. And so what do you think the industry is going to have to do to be able to really leverage innovation?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think that the tasks that we do are largely the same as what have been fundamental to marketing in the past, but the way we go about it is radically different. The market around us is changing, the room for forgiveness is changing, the number of stakeholders involved is changing. So when I think about some of those key things, the first thing is to make sure that every product is truly differentiated, it's truly unique. But the way we prove that is not the same as it would have been 5 or 10 years ago. Almost all the new products launched now have comparative trials with drugs that are already in the market. Companies are increasingly working with the FDA to talk about how they bring products to market with a companion diagnostic test. So sometimes it's really important to know who will be most helped by your product and who's not going to be helped by it. So those are changes in executing the product profile that you bring to market. And then the second thing is really knowing your customers. You were a huge champion of that at Bristol Myers Squibb. It's always been important. But now there are more customers, and the way they interconnect is different, and we really have to understand everything along that pathway so that marketers can take the right kind of intervention, and that can be quite innovative. And then another aspect is pricing. Pricing has always been important, but I've seen huge changes in that. We really need to show that we're bringing value to the patient and to the payer. And the way we do that is with pharmacoeconomic studies done early and done well to prove that value. So same fundamentals, but done in a very different way over the course of time. Lots of room for innovation and for distinction in that.
Those are very excellent points. You're right. I think that the whole value proposition for products these days is really the driving point.
Well, you talked about leadership within companies and the culture. What are some of the things that you think need to be in place within a company to be innovative? What kind of teams, what kind of leadership needs to be in place?
Well, I think that the culture of innovation and the leadership of innovation can be many different ways. I think there are different examples. Innovative CEO who's feeding ideas down into the organization and funding particular teams to leverage and explore and understand those ideas. A good example of that is a company like Google, where they have a sort of a self-starting executive-sponsored program where everybody's encouraged to come up with ideas. Now, not all ideas can be funded, so there's an employee panel that vets them and chooses which the big ideas, the breakthrough ideas that are going to be funded and really pushed forward. And I think there also has to be a strong culture of exploring and really getting deep insights and being iterative. You start a pilot, learn from it. And then I think finally another important point is to really learn from things that didn't go so well.
Well, that is a very powerful way to learn.
You'd mentioned some things to me when we were chatting earlier.
A couple of things come to mind. One is just a premise that we learned from our failures. And I'll just share with you a story from my upbringing. My father used to work for General Electric, and many years ago when I was in my 20s, he told me a story about a team at General Electric that had tried a very high-profile experiment, and that did not work. Their business model turned out to be a failure. But those people were very richly rewarded and got a lot of kudos for having the courage to try this idea that made a great deal of sense. And that really stuck with me. If you reward the lofty experiment, then people won't be afraid to innovate. And then later in my career, when I was at another company, we had an issue with one of my brands. And another powerful lesson is we really put a lot of effort into learning from that experience. I learned then that the military is actually a very famous continuous learning organization, and we adopted a technique from there after action, and we had a meeting where all the people involved talked about what went wrong, and by identifying the problem, companies can find out where to focus and where to innovate towards solutions. So when things go wrong, it gives you a powerful incentive to innovate, and you have to be very careful to reward those who do innovate.
I think that's a really important point. I had a similar experience at another company where a very large brand was taken by surprise by a very, very strong competitor, and the company took the entire sort of top 30 people from the company from all walks of life across the company, R&D and business and what have you, and really did a 2-day deep dive. And it was a really transparent, open, fabulous process that I think kudos to the company, but also was very helpful to grow and learn from. So.
And powerful role modeling. If that's done at the higher levels of the organization, people can admit to we could have done this better. Then everyone can get on board to make it better for the next time.
That's a really good point. So what do you think a brand manager or somebody in the industry is going to be having to do in the next, say 3 or 5 years' time? I mean, there's so much change in technology and tools. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot will be different. I mean, the marketing fundamentals are largely the same, the things that we have to think about in terms of differentiating our product, deep customer insight, making sure that we're pricing appropriately for the value. But the way we go about implementing those will be different. And the nature of the market is going to be different. Most people think that the era of the big blockbusters that we started out with is over. So products will be serving smaller patient groups. And that means that we really have to be savvy in terms of how do we find those patients and how do we understand holistically their experience and who is a stakeholder in that decision. And then we have to be extremely efficient in how we reach them. The budgets for marketing are just going to continue to be facing some constraints. So same things gone about a different way, using new media, social media, partnering with the FDA. The FDA is working with companies to try to figure out how do we do social media. The FDA is working with companies to figure out how do we develop drugs with companion diagnostics. So I think there'll be more collaboration in ways we haven't enjoyed so far. But again, all centered around the patient with everyone having that common interest, which hopefully will help all of us be successful.
Just building on what you're saying about point about targeted, I think the future really is going to be changing dramatically with personalized medicine, pharmacogenomics, biomarkers. The world for the scientist as well as the marketer is going to become much more complex as people are trying to identify the genes that's causing such and such cancer, then developing the diagnostic test, or it be a blood test or some kind of device, that's going to be critical. And then how that's all brought together in a synergistic way, in an innovative way, across the business continuum, across different companies perhaps, is going to be very important. So exciting times ahead, and I think innovation is going to be a key to the industry's success. It's been great speaking with you.
Likewise. Thank you.